Hey guys, I'm Jezzer at Screen Rant, and we're at New York Comic Con with How to Train Your Dragon 3. How are you guys doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome.
First,
it's great to be here.
yeah, so you guys are doing your circuit, promoting the movie. First questions for Jay. Going back to 2010, did you ever think that you'd be at this point with the franchise and how big and how beloved it is?
Absolutely not. No. I not in my wildest dreams. I think you work your whole career hoping that you'll be a part of something that's a quarter as impactful as one of these movies, let alone the entire movement that is all of the saga.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, yeah, there are very few things in my 36 years that I've done for 10 years. Period. So it's pretty. It's insane. It's really, really insane to be here. I don't have the words. All I know is it's somewhere in between gratitude and melancholy.
Oh, nice. So these two have been working, Brad. These two have been working together for almost half a decade. How does it feel jumping in, like in this third installment? Was it hard, or did you find it you just gel well?
I think it's both things. I mean, there's kind of there's a period of time where you jump in and you know that there's some really nice tight relationships, right? There's crazy benefits in that, where Jay knows this character cold. Dean and Jay work together so well, in this case, and so it's partly just letting them do their thing. And as always, it's my job is to make their lives easier, right, and help facilitate. So Jay does his best performance, Dean does his greatest direction. So jumping into that in this case with their personalities has been amazing, because they're gracious and they're open and they're dedicated artists.
So Dean, you've done something that's never really been done. You've written, directed a trilogy, a franchise. Is there any future projects multi-film projects that you look forward to doing in the future?
Well, I guess you always hope that it's going to take hold in such a way that you could expand the universe, but you can never really plan for it. And we certainly didn't plan it with the first How to Train Your Dragon. It was Chris Sanders and I had jumped onto the project with very little time left, and the orders to sort of revamp it and bring to it more fantasy adventure tropes. But we had no idea that it would spring a sequel, never mind a trilogy. When I was asked to come up with ideas for a sequel, that's where my instinct was to pursue a trilogy, because there were questions that were unanswered.
Yeah.
In the first film, and there was an opportunity to see this character go from nuisance runt to wise Viking chief, as hinted at in Cressida Cowell's books. So yes. Our narratives are quite different, but I think the essence is the same. The journey of this character, recounting a time when there were dragons and what that meant to his life and how it helped him grow up. So, yeah, I hope that I get to work on other special projects going forward, but I'm also really glad that we were able to complete this one with purpose and with integrity.
Jay, tell me about Hiccup and Toothless' dynamic in this film. They've been together for many, many years, and they started off that they were trying to prove themselves, especially Toothless not being able to fly, and Hiccup not being the typical Viking that you used to. I just saw the trailer, and I'm a grown man, and I think it almost brought me to tears. Like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be one of the
cry too.
Yeah,
as it turns out.
This is gonna be one of those films where I go into the theater, I'm just gonna be like, I hope no one sees that there's water in my eyes. So describe to me that dynamic between them and the realization that Hiccup may have to say goodbye to Toothless.
Yeah, I think it's they formed a unit. In the first one, it's less about two characters than two characters becoming one together. We're now 2 movies lived into this, and as Hiccup gets older, so does Toothless, and stuff gets slightly, I won't say complicated, but it's like, every mama's boy, the mama hopes that he's going to find a woman or a man later on that'll take over for her, but doesn't make it easy for her to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And so I think we start to see this really darling friendship now kind of tested by maturity and tested by evolution, and well, this is just part and parcel of growing up. Is you can't be the same type of friends you were forever.
Yeah.
You know, Fox and the Hound or whatever. There's going to be an inevitable time where your relationship will shift. Doesn't necessarily mean for the better, for the worse. It just changes, and that's a big part of this one.
Now, you guys, what can you tell me about? Hold on, sorry. What can you guys tell me about the Abrams' new character?
Grimille the Grizzly he's a famed hunter who comes from the continent, and he's notorious. He's notorious for his cunning and his skill. He's famous for having hunted all of the Night Furies to extinction, or so they thought. So it turns out that the one that survived befriended Hiccup and is now reigning as the alpha dragon over the largest flock of dragons ever assembled. He's brought into the story as someone who could be hired to extract Toothless and thereby lead the dragon army away from Burke and into the hands of those who want to weaponize them. But he was really conceived as a character who represents everything Hiccup stands. He's against everything Hiccup stands for. He does not see inclusion and coexistence as a positive thing. He's demonizes dragons. He sees them as thieves and murderers that don't even deserve to breathe the same air as the humans. And so he's elitist in that sense. He's just rotten in a lot of ways. He represents intolerance in a world where Hiccup is trying to spread the word of coexistence.
And F. Murray Abraham comes in and he gives this sort of psychotic gravitas to the character.
Yeah,
It's amazing. It's a really beautiful performance on his part. We're super happy to have him in the movie.
Jay, with Hiccup, in the beginning of the film, he's trying to prove to himself, to his father. In the second film, he's learning about his mother. Tell me about his journey in this film particularly. What kind of struggles does he come up against?
They're very internal, a lot of them, because it's sort of like he's identified himself in a certain way as the kind of he has been responsible. Hiccup's responsible for the kind of paradigm shift on Burke that allows dragons to be part of our way of life. And I think he's taken on as well all of the weight of his father's legacy and trying to keep that going as well. I think on this one, I'll go so far as to say Hiccup's real foe is himself in this one to a degree where he has to change his point of view. And traditionally in the other two movies, Hiccup's the one changing other people's point of view. And in this one, he kind of needs a bit of a shift of his own because he's got beliefs ingrained in him that maybe don't make as much sense as they once did.
And it's also that he every success that Hiccup's had, going back to the first movie, is largely dependent on his relationship with Toothless. Yeah. And so one of the motivating factors to his growth in this movie is that he has to begin to operate without Toothless and see how that feels, and it goes fairly badly. So it's reinforcement that should he lose Toothless in his life, will he return to the same kind of ne'er-do-well that he was before Toothless entered? So it's a challenge he has to face and overcome in order to really grow.
When you guys started the franchise, CGI, and it was pretty fresh, but I mean we've advanced to a point. Was there any difficulties or any things that were made easier over time, continuing this franchise?
With overtime?
Oh, like overtime. Over the course of the
I was gonna say, yeah, we work Saturdays, so overtime made it a little bit easier.
Technology-wise, like
there are aspects of Dean's aspirations that are much more achievable because of DreamWorks has written a crazy great render for this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
There's animation tools that make iteration and much more iteration possible. So a lot of times we are artists, we are creatures of iteration, right? And repetition to make things great. So the tools have helped in that respect as well. So the typical things are still difficult. Natural phenomenon, smoke, clouds, fire, all these kinds of things are still difficult. but in this movie, we're taking that to a new level.
Yes.
And there's, Dean's asking for characters to run through waist-high grasses with pollen flying in the air. That would have been unheard of 20 years ago to ask for something like that.
Now, Dean, are there any characters, other characters in the story that you wanted to expand more on their story, or didn't get a lot of light? They didn't get to expand on their storyline, or that they will in this film?
It's interesting. In animation, we're limited to about 90 minutes at most. Just it's a restriction of the budget, to be honest, because it's so expensive to make. So screen time is always an issue for us. We're always having to pare back, and characters unfortunately don't get as much screen time as we would like to allot them if they're not central to the story. And therefore, it is Hiccup's movie, and he is the character of emphasis. He's supported by his group of friends and cohorts. Astrid has a great role in the movie, and so does Valka, and Stoic even comes back in flashbacks, informing Hiccup in the present. And so everybody has their part to play, but we don't spend a lot of time going off into different directions. In fact, in early drafts of this movie, I had a kind of a B story of Drago. Drago having survived the events of Dragon 2, marooned on an island with a vicious dragon, having to make peace with it and actually befriend it in order to find his way off of the island, and in so doing, having a change of heart. So when it came down to the final battle, he was fighting on the side of the Burkians. It was an idea that I really liked, and I thought it would give his character much more dimension than he had in the second film. But ultimately, it had to be pared back, and it was Steven Spielberg who actually told me. He said it's an ambitious and bold idea, but you simply don't have the screen time to do it, and you'll actually do your main story an injustice if you try to carve out time to tell this transformational story that doesn't really have room to blossom within the context of this third film. So, smart advice. You don't get to do everything you want, but it forces you actually, in its own sort of story discipline way, to really narrow in on what's important about the movie.
So, with kids growing up, this is the last question, with kids that grew up with this franchise, what do you want them to take away from this conclusion to this epic story? Like themes?
Well, for me, I want them to be psyched that we made these movies for them. There's a sort of global appeal that they have, but they are also very made for specific people, which is sort of square pegs, which is like, that's what I was, that's what Dean was, that's what every good musician was at one point, and so thank you for your support and for being with us, but also hold tight and know that what makes you different is difficult right now, but it's going to be what saves you later on.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for joining us and spending some time with us. I'm going to be blaming you for me crying in February 2019 in the movie theater. But thank you guys so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your con.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.